No, okay.
Well, something we've always been able to connect on is dogs. So, Martin Berlin, and welcome to the lockdown sessions, and thank you for coming along today.
Thanks for asking, bro.
Martin, now I don't know if you're aware, but you and I actually go back all the way to around 2003, when a football club I was building in Hampstead, North London, a women's football club, was looking for sponsorship. I came and knocked on your door. And you very generously didn't just sponsor us for the year for a whole kit, but you actually sponsored us for 5 years. And I think the payback was that about 9 years later, that team that Maccabi had sponsored made up 75% of the first ever women's squad to go to a Maccabi game. So there was a relationship there from the very beginning, and sport is what brought me into your life and you into mine. So I wanted to bring you on because working as heading up a sports organization, you've clearly seen challenges and changes with funding and delivering your services. These lockdown sessions are for me about understanding like the learnings and lessons you've made from a business and a charitable point of view over the last year, because working in sport and in a world that needs fundraising, how have you coped? How did you guys cope?
Well, sort of going back to come forward, I'd had a 20 years career as a buyer and buying controller at Selfridges in London, and part of the training was to be a manager as well as a buyer. So you didn't sort of just buy in isolation, travel off to wherever, buy the goods, send them back and hope for the best. On a Saturday, you were actually responsible for selling them. So if they didn't sell, you were the first person to see that they didn't sell. So that buyer manager relationship, management training there at Selfridges, which was exemplary, and having a staff of about 100 people in various times that different departments I looked after, all sort of shaped my management skills and my management ability, very much as a generalist, not a specialist. And that's, we ran our own profit centres, and I had a good career there and thoroughly enjoyed it. And so when I came into the not-for-profit sector, very different, very, very, very different. I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't really know what was there. I didn't know the scale of the organisation. Heavily swayed by being run by volunteers at the time. And so I tried to bring the skills to develop a business platform into the not-for-profit. And fortunately, very early on, just prior to 2003, I managed to put together a sponsorship deal with another organisation who wanted to be sort of reaching out to young people. And so actually they wanted young people, we had young people, so we put the two together, and a 6-figure sponsorship deal sort of gave me that business platform to be able to start to develop the business. But it was really strange, you coming to ask for help or support would have been out of the woodwork. I probably wouldn't have even known you were out there. It just turned up, and that was how most days were. It was like, oh really? Oh, what? How does this connect up? How does that connect up? But actually, by the time 2009 came, which was when we went away together for the first time international games, so the World Game, I think we had some sort of framework and looking after squads, how we managed the organisation on a day-to-day business, how we bought uniform, how we travelled, how we had realised there were no longer youth clubs, so we'd gone into Jewish schools, which had by now started to develop at a huge rate. When I went to school, there was one Jewish school. There's now nearly 40 of them. So it's so changing direction constantly, I would say, is how we managed. And the fundraising, I've always had a sort of long-term view of everything. I talk to people, chat to people. Remember the days we used to go out for coffee,
right,
or out for a drink, or whatever it is. Yeah, and really sort of just develop relationships and personal relationships. And I found those to be much more successful in some ways than filling out forms or just sort of trying to go through proper application processes. I think there are relationships there. And so eventually the turnover of the organisation was sizable. We had a team of 21 staff pre-COVID from what was one or two originally when I came, multi-million-pound turnover, doing lots of things, seeing around 80,000 people a year from informal education in Jewish schools, where we've seen nearly 40,000 people, to various other programs, after-school programs, curricular PE, international games, Holocaust Memorial Project called Yellow Candle, just a whole range of things. Now I've sort of tried to take those skills and move them into a management consultancy that I'm doing for, particularly for Maccabi Europe at this point, where there are 40 countries at all different stages of development, but most of them still one man and his stock. So I've been at that through COVID. I started it really in January last year. I managed to get to two places, and then the world shut. So that's been quite a challenge. So yeah, I don't have a. I'm not a guru. I just try and find a way through every day and see if I can find the solutions to whatever's in front of me.
I think working across Europe will be fascinating. I'm reminded when you say that about 5 or 6 years ago, I happened to be in Munich for some work, and I went for a run in the evening. I was staying in an Airbnb, and I went for a run, and I happened to be staying opposite the Maccabi ground and training ground for Munich based Maccabi. So I went in and I said hello to the guys. I introduced myself and told them my links, and I stayed for the evening and did some training with them. And that was the kind of feel it had, right? It didn't matter. I was just an English guy over for business who happened to be staying opposite their training ground, and they welcomed me in like a brother. It must be quite lovely to be in an environment where actually there is that kind of immediate intimacy and camaraderie.
So that's the difference between running a business and running a not-for-profit. There's no two ways about it. That sense of belonging, the commonality that, just 2 days ago we were all doing the same thing roughly at the same time in terms of celebrating of the Passover. Irrespective of where you've come from, you will say the same prayers, irrespective of. And I've had that experience when I left Maccabi GB at the end of last year. I had about 300 messages from all over the world. It was just, and my wife, I didn't know, we talk about it, but she's like, what, Argentina, Chile, Sweden, Norway, Australia, Canada, everywhere. And the common thread was that we belong to this movement, this global movement. And 100%, if you're in trouble in a country, look up where the local Maccabi group are, and they will help you. And that is without. It's an unwritten thing. We would know it's not written anywhere. It's just like it's what you do. And I know including my own son who worked in the States for 6 years. His first base was to try and dig out that Maccabi sort of where are Maccabi operating. And I said to him, interesting, why are you doing that? He said, because they know me there. And I think that's probably what you experienced. They know you there. You don't have to tell them who you are and you're in. That's it.
Right, correct. Yeah, no, it was exactly that. And it was a lovely evening. And then we sat there afterwards and had a chat about actually the European Games that had taken place a few years ago. And one of them had been there, and so suddenly we were both in Vienna at the same time in a tournament. So I think that connection is great. One thing as well that kind of springs to mind, and I think it's really relevant today, is the idea of inclusion. And in leadership, they talk about inclusive leadership in organizations, it's inclusion and diversity. How have you been able to keep so ahead? Because I think you guys were ahead of the game, not least of all in sponsoring a women's football squad in 2003, by the way. How did you make sure? Because I also want to, look at the football darkest secret thing and think about the protection side of young people when you're working with so many. How did you get so ahead? You must have had a staff team of people who were forward thinking. How did it work for inclusion?
The girl thing. Probably you were one of the first to come along. I think there was conversations even at the turn of 2000 probably to say, well, female participation was negligible in international sport. certainly around Jewish community life. Netball, maybe a little bit of tennis, not really that many sports. The football was certainly one that was had the capacity to engage young females. And it was really weird because we used to do schools tournaments where lots of girls would come and play, but that was normally so they could get out of a lesson. Because actually, when you used to come along and start recruiting, there weren't that many, and so we had this bizarre situation of having a few hundred over here and nobody over there. We've always tried to be open facing, I think, pluralistic in the confines of what the organisation is, which is there for the strengthening the long-term future of the Jewish community, both in the UK and also around the world and in Europe, and just to try to stay open facing. And the world sort of caught up in a way. I mean, the Equalities Act 2010 was a challenge for us because it was about, well, are we too exclusive? And a number of the authorities um, checked with us, and we provided evidence that we weren't providing football just for football's sake. And you've been to Maccabea, etc. The football is relevant, but actually there's so much more going on. And when they looked at our website and they looked at our publications and they looked at the work we were doing, they were like, actually we get there's more going on here than just playing football, because that you can't justify turning up at a pitch, getting changed, playing football, getting off the pitch, getting changed and going home, and saying, but you can't play and you can't play and you can't play. Right. But when you explain that actually this is part of trying to keep a community together, up until now, it's worked. I wouldn't swear to the fact that judicially at some point it won't, because I think that's the way the world's gone. But what we've then done is opened ourselves to other organisations. We work with Telmama and Muslim organisations, and we did lots of things with lots of different partners. And then we created a project, and you're quite right in what you said. The team created a project called Stand Up, which is a very unique programme with an Jewish and Muslim facilitator going into the classroom talking about anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hate. And that is a unique project. It's now funded partly by the government. So yeah, we've stayed relevant. We've tried to stay relevant, but I think that maybe goes back to my buying days. I'm not a particularly clever guy. It's just I have a gut feel about certain things at certain times, and I've been blessed to have some really very progressive people, as you said, working with me. So I think some of it's more luck than judgment in terms of how we've got there. But always, or never say no, always keep that open mind to development of, when someone walks through the door and says, I've got a women's football team, it's easy to say, no, girls don't play football and send you out again. But actually it's like, well, hold on, how does that connect up to what we're doing? So that's always keeping an open mind, I suppose, is the answer.
Well, and you can probably see behind me, I've still got a medal hanging on my wall there, which was one of the finest moments of being a football manager, was standing in Vienna.
Got my son's over here who's gold and silver medals from the World Games and European Games. So yeah, you keep them with you. A quick story, Brad. I went to somebody passed away, and I went to the Shiva, the mourning where the family mourn. And people introduced me at that time and say, "Oh, Martin works for Maccabi," and there were an older couple sitting on the side, and the wife kept nudging the guy. He said, "Show him, show him, show him," and he took out Star of David, which was made from his silver medal that he'd won at the Maccabea.
I love that story. That's excellent.
And so that's what it means to somebody. It's on your wall, it's on my wall, it's sitting around his neck. So, it may not have been, it might have been 20 years ago, but it doesn't lose you. And I think, that's why I was always very proud of this work and quite emotional about the work, because it's very deep-seated and meaningful to so many people, and you don't have to win a medal to do it either. So
no, I think winning a medal was really good fun, because we lost in the fourth place playoff in the World Games, and that hurt quite a lot. I remember having conversations with you about sort of that balance between the competitive side and the experience. And before I'd gone out to one of those games, I would argue with all of you in the leadership.
Absolutely.
For me, it was about the competition. How can you take us out there and not want me to win? But actually, seeing the transformation, because most of my squad had never even been actually to Israel. One of my coaches was so transformed. Um, he actually has a tattoo now on his arm that says "Mashpucha" in Hebrew.
That's amazing.
Yeah, right. Just astonishing. The squad bought me at the '09 games a really beautiful chai to represent the 18th games. Again, like you say, it's kept. And I think they're talking about doing a 10-year anniversary. It's 10 years this July since we won in Vienna. And that that sense of belonging, I want to explore that a little bit, because how did you keep a sense of belonging going when you all had to kind of just separate? Like one minute we're all in the office working on our projects, and then the next minute everybody's at home and you're not running events and you're not out in schools. How did that sense of belonging and purpose sustain itself over the last year?
I don't know. I mean, I suppose you could say we're in suspended animation to a point. I don't know what your view is or what will happen when this finally lifts. Will life spring back
Mm,
to where it was? I do feel quite strongly that we designed life in a particular way, not we, but humanity. They wanted to be with people. They want to have interaction. They want to have a hug. They want to be able to go out for a coffee or a beer or whatever. They don't. I know when Zoom first arrived, it was like, you know what, we don't need to do anything else or go anywhere else ever. You know, this is
right,
the answer. That was the first few weeks, wasn't it? And
right,
now everyone is absolutely desperate to be able, and this most beautiful day, yet you can't go and, you know, we live in Norfolk now, but you can't drive to the local pub and sit outside and have a drink at lunchtime today because it's closed. I think that there is going to be a pent up desire for that normality. You know, going on holiday shouldn't really be the be all and end all, especially we live in a beautiful country and the weather, if the weather's good. But I think it's more what it represents to people, and actually not having a boundary between work and play, and that's what I would say that's got lost. You know, I come into this room, and we're very fortunate the way we live, and I've got my own office, and often I don't come out of it till 7 o'clock, and I'm like, really? And I heard a good story this week. Somebody said, "Oh, we're going back to the office, and I'm going to miss my hour's walk every morning after breakfast." And somebody said, "Well, why don't you still have your walk after breakfast every morning?" And he said, "I don't know why not." He said, "I'm my own boss." He said, "Well, go in at 10 o'clock. What's the difference? 10:30. You got your phone there if anyone needs you. You know, don't spring back all the way to being at your desk at 7 in the morning, etc." So I think there is a real desire to hold on to certain things, that we created a life in a particular way, and I think we've done a huge amount of work on Zoom. I mean, from my point of view, reaching 30 countries on Zoom has been a bit like you said with your business. I mean, we couldn't have invented it better. So from that point of view, it's allowed us to reach our audience on a regular basis every few weeks. Whereas traveling around, I would never have been able to see that many. So I think there's been positives and negatives with that, but I think life will. I mean, what do you think? Do you think it will spring back to where it was?
I think there's going to be a split. So first of all, I have a little worry about the kind of what I call the Brexit effect, where you're going to have those that have been vaccinated and those that haven't, and we live in this kind of binary world now where everyone gets angry if you don't agree with their side. So those people who've been vaccinated, they're going to have their vaccine certificates and be allowed to go everywhere, and those who, for whatever reason, don't have it are going to be angry with them because they're being discriminated against. So I see problems in society, but for work, I think it's going to be a hybrid of what we've been doing. Most businesses have proven that they can survive remotely and virtually. I think from a commercial property perspective, I'd hate to be running a commercial property business, because I think that's going to be a tough gig. as businesses start to think, do we really need 4 floors of that office building?
I've heard that is happening, but again, it's finding that balance. No, a few of us have invented things sitting on our own. Normally it's sitting,
Right.
going into the kitchen and making a cup of tea, and so and so comes in, and you start talking about something, and you go, "Oh, that's a good idea," or you move office, you go in and out of offices. So I think that the creative side of things is important for teams and product. But I have read this weekend, I think the Times said about, maybe going in 2 or 3 days of the week, going in for certain meetings, flexing your time, taking the kids to school first, walking the dog,
Right.
whatever. If that is the upshot, look, I'm talking as a 60-year-old guy, but I think that would be very positive, because I do think a lot of people have lost their work-life balance. Um, and this has sort of given it back a bit, because it's like people doing other things apart from just working. So I
And
hope
yet,
some of it stays.
we're also working really hard, because I can empathise with your story of going into my office at the bottom of the garden, and I go into the office and I can be there for 14 hours working actually.
Yeah.
Now, normally I'd have left home at that time to go and drive to a client. So I would still be out for 12 to 14 hours, but actually I'm probably working harder now that I'm not having to commute, and you'll remember I used to travel a lot for work. Obviously
Yeah.
that's stopped. And a lot of my work was, in front of say 10 to 15 people in a room. That's not going to go back to normal, because organizations aren't going to fly people from all over a region, Europe or APAC, to come in to a hotel room, banquet room with no windows to sit, no social distancing, to have a workshop. They're just not going to do it. So I think there's some challenges there.
The intensity of that 14 hours is the issue, really, because at least if you went out, you got in the car, you got on the train, you got on the plane, sort of broke the day up, you meet people, you're on the phone,
Right.
it's a nice, you know, I think those bits, I mean, just sitting here and just thinking, yeah, I'm not actually going to leave here. I don't know. It depends your job, your role. I mean, there are some jobs just can't be done, sitting by a desk. But I think there will be organisations that reduce the amount of floor space they require. They will hot desk. They will have conference areas. I think it will be a change. But I also do believe that life was created in a particular way, because as humans we needed that interaction, and
Yeah, yeah.
a
I
lot
mean,
of that will go back, I think.
it's connection. Actually, it goes back to we can make another link with sort of the World Games. It's all about connection. One of the great moments of those World Games is when you're waiting before the opening ceremony, and all the athletes, thousands of them, are sort of congregated in this area from all over the world, and people are just connecting. And they're not just connecting; they're connecting ultimately forever. Those friendships that are made just standing around waiting. And I think it, in a micro level, that's what it looks like in a Macabre Games. On a macro level, that you're right, society is designed to make connections. And yeah, I also think that people have become a little bit institutionalized during this last year.
Yeah, that's true.
There may be some people really challenged to, get back on it.
You've hit the nail on the head. Actually, I was somewhere the other day, and oh no, the village shop, and this woman was explaining that her husband was anxious about going back to the office, and she was trying to explain to him that he couldn't sit at home and do his job indefinitely, and that actually he needed to. I think that was fairly representative. I'm hearing that in quite a few quarters of people saying, "Well, I quite got used to that. Now I'm worried of how." So anxiety, mental health has been a big issue during this whole process. But I think there will be people anxious about normality. Not everyone's life was that great to run back to. That's another side of it. I'm fortunate enough. Um, there's a plane waiting at some point. I'll be my head office where I go is in Amsterdam, and I love traveling and like you do, and it's all part of that mix. But for other people, they probably dreaded going into the office or wherever they had to go, or getting
Yeah.
in the truck again, or
The introverts have been like absolutely like celebrating over the last year as they haven't had to do all of that, all of that
yeah,
stuff. But that mental health bit again. I mean, I think that one of the lessons for me have been the mental well-being, because you're right when you say the life-work balance has gone. I mean, I had someone the other week tell me that it's not working from home, it's sleeping in your office. And literally, if he turned his
yeah, yeah,
laptop around, you saw his bed.
yeah, yeah.
And he said there's no line. He was in Singapore. They live in an apartment, him, his wife, his two young kids under 8, in an apartment, no balcony. And they've been on lockdown for 16 months, pretty much. And it's strict there. And, he's like, it's tough, right? It's tough.
I do feel for anyone living in that environment, wherever they are, with young children. Yeah, when you get older and you're privileged, yeah, we sat in the garden for most of the first 6 months, didn't we? The weather was gorgeous. We were able to go for walks and different things. So no, we haven't struggled in that way. Our children have. They've all had different challenges, either in their work or their home life. But I think we're very fortunate. I'm very aware of that. I shouldn't take part in that conversation, because I think some people have had it really difficult. And
I remember talking to a friend of mine, 17-year-old son, who was moaning about lockdown. And actually, we were having a serious, more therapeutic conversation, but he was having a bit of a moan at the end. And I said to him, it must be really hard to live in a house with a garden, have a 40-inch TV in your bedroom with a PS4, stream Netflix, Disney Plus, and Amazon Prime. It's a tough life, mate. It's a tough life. Oh, your iPhone. Yeah, of course, you've got that as, and there he was complaining, and he sort of stopped and looked at me and he went, yeah, okay, fair enough. Because people I've spoken to, say in India, who I've worked with, who have passed comments to me like, Brad, we hear about washing your hands, but that presumes you've got running water in your house,
yeah,
right?
it's I don't know. You're very well travelled. There's huge disparity between the haves and the have-nots in our own country, never mind elsewhere. And as you say, I often see that advert for running water. The charity that's talks about a lack of water, people walking for miles between villages to get water. And I mean, it's pretty hard in 2021 to, when everything, iPhones, this, that, the other, oh, that doesn't work, we'll buy another one of those, or whatever. It's very hard, but the world is unfair in that way. And there's a huge inequality. You talk about equality, there's a huge inequality.
Right. And not only that, there's also a lack of equity for people. So it's not only that it's unequal, but it's really difficult to make it fair. I want to change the subject, and from a sporting point of view, you mentioned before, 40 to 80,000 interactions you'll have, mainly young people. I watched and cried the football's Darkest Secrets program.
Yeah.
And of course, you took over at Maccabi in 2000, but I was a Maccabi boy in the late 70s and early 80s, played football in all their leagues right through to 16, and went to their clubs on a Sunday as well. How, when you look back and when you see sort of safeguarding now, and you watch that program, what kind of does it make you think? You were running a sporting organization. You have the duty of care over thousands of people. You're taking them away on travels, on tournaments. I mean, it's a logistical nightmare now. Or
So if I go back just slightly before that, when you started traveling many years ago. I mean, the duty of care was not a language you would hear.
Right.
Brad would round that whole group of people. We're going, we're going to play wherever it is. I used to have, I managed teams as well. We had all 11 kids in the back of the car hanging out the windows, you know, going to Redbridge or wherever.
Yeah.
No seatbelts, no nothing. No one ever mentioned duty of care to us. We just did. You know, we were trying to provide sport or take part in sport and football and things like that. And then bit by bit, the world started saying, but that's not right, and you need to look after these people, etc. And sadly, whether it was sport or the church or whoever it is, there are people who took advantage of the situations they were in, and parents very happily gave their children to these parents. And it reminded me actually, on the Saturday, four of us that all had children the same age, and we went to the park. The kids were only about 4 or 5, and we started playing football on a Saturday morning about 11 o'clock. Bit by week, every week somebody else turned up, and we got to the point where we had like these 20, 30, 40 kids. Parents were dropping them at the gate, and the kid was running down the hill. It was like we hadn't even set anything up. This was nothing. This was just people coming together to play football. I don't think parents, and understandably, because I wouldn't have done, had the vision that there are evil people around and they will take advantage of the situation and of young people for their own gains. I just don't think it was in the parents' head, because they don't think like that. It's not, you know. I remember Danny, when my son, who you know, is a goalkeeper, got some bruising on his leg once, and we had to go to A&E. And for the first time, you know, and he was dressed in his kit. Right? We'd taken him straight from wherever we were playing. You know, the doctor came, and then someone from the social team came, wanted to see if he had any other bruises on his leg. So this started to become slowly. It's not, you know, it's not a light on, light off these things. It's like realization that something's going on, and actually we need to be more aware. I also remember when we did our first health and safety document in 2003. We employed an outside agency, and we went through all of these things. And safeguarding wasn't called safeguarding, but there was bits in there in terms of how to behave. And some of our lay people threw them on the floor and walked out of the room. They didn't want to be called to account, and not because they were paedophiles. They just didn't want to be called to account. They didn't want to do a risk assessment. They didn't want to do these things. They'd given it their time to run a football team. They'd given it their time to run a youth club. So, you know, filling out 20 forms before they even started just wasn't what they wanted to do. And I sort of get that. But life changed, and safeguarding became key. And I actually chaired a community group called Rochette on safeguarding eventually in the past 5 years, because as you rightly identify, we have to look after a lot of young people, especially when we're on international games, but also our affiliated bodies of football leagues, etc. And we became that leader in those areas because we needed to do so. So we trained, we got training, we got all the information, we passed it on, and we've got a safeguarding policy. All the leagues have got safeguarding policies now, and taking an international team away. And you last, I think, came away in 2011.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, it was going on at the time. We were much more aware at that time, and I can think of 1 or 2 incidents at that time about age of drinking, influencing people, etc. And at that time, people were like, "Yeah, but," and it was like, "Well, no, there's a change here, and we need to look after that young person." And you know, the what if. I mean, I just tell you, Brad, I took teams away where we used to have. If the kid was naughty, we had a room where one of the managers might sleep, and the kid was sent to that room to sleep. So that's how far back I go. So
I remember standing in the lobby of the hotel in Vienna, actually calling one of my young players' parents back in the UK, asking them their opinion on whether or not their daughter would be allowed to go out and celebrate with the team. And her parents said no, she didn't want her going out. And
I remember standing there. I
stayed back in the hotel with this young person. But it's you're right. We were more aware. I remember at my first football club when I was coaching women, I had a prodigious 14-year-old girl playing for me. She was a Chelsea player. She was brilliant, left winger. She could do anything with the ball. She couldn't follow instruction, but she was a brilliant footballer. But she was 14 and she was very young. And I hadn't even considered that her mum would drop her off at training on a Thursday night. I would drive her home. I, I would take this 14-year-old girl in my car and drop her home. And my captain said to me one day, she goes, Brad, you can't be doing that.
Yeah.
Because she can go into the house and actually say anything, and you're completely at risk. And that was the moment when I learned about it. This idea that actually you've got to be careful.
Those we've just had about 4 or 5 examples of just between us, And I could keep going. There's loads. I've seen managers drunk dancing on bars, where the kids are sleeping upstairs. It's like, well, what about the kids? It's like, oh yeah. Now, change comes normally either very quickly because something major happens, or it happens over a period of time. And I think this happened over a period of time. And today it's paramount. Our junior management team is full of young people who are trained and developed in how to look after young people. And in fact, we started the Streetwise program that we had in terms of trying to inspire confidence in young people inside and out was brought into play on international teams. So when we went away the last time, 19 now, we had a whole team of management who are dedicated to looking after the welfare of those young people. And that has changed completely. And being a parent, by the way, doesn't give you that qualification.
No.
We often have that argument with parents and with managers who are parents, and they think they know best. But actually, often they're young people who have been trained in that area, and they know whether it's how to be on social media, whether you should do something or shouldn't do something. They think differently. So somebody who said to you, Brad, you can't put a player in your car and take them home, and we all did it over a certain time, is the sort of person we now have that says, hold on, that can't be done like that. I am grateful that we don't appear to have had a historic case. I'm not saying there hasn't been one, because I think in every batch of 500 people you get all sorts, but grateful that doesn't appear to have come out or that happened. But it does play on my mind often that the community must have had these situations because it just must.
Down to, right? I mean, the law of averages says,
Yeah.
unfortunately, that there may be something. I guess when you look back, there must be an immense sense of pride at what you grew that organization into, the way it touched so many people's lives. I know you have humility always, Martin, but talk to me about that sense of pride, because as you move on from one and you then consult with other, they're still wanting your experience.
There's a great speech. I don't know if you remember, Spike Milligan was given a Lifetime Achievement Award, and they got Prince Charles to give it to him.
Right.
And when he came up, he said a few things, but one of the things he said, I'm going to thank nobody because I did it all by myself. And so it always reminds me, Brad, you've had a good business over a number of years. I'm sure it's hard to remember how you got to various bits at times. Thankfully, you're in the right place at the right time. You make mistakes, you try to not make them again. You have good people around you, and I was blessed with that for sure. I allowed people to get on and do and just try and corral things. Learned a lot about my faith, which I actually knew very little about, really. I wasn't a religious person, or always a proud Jew, but never religious. And so I learned a lot about that. And just that inner gut feeling on product was always something that was good for me and good to me. And I had it at Selfridges, and then I sort of had it here, the Fun Run, Yellow Candles, Streetwise. All of these things were driven because there was an innate sense of this actually has some legs to it. This could really work. Um, Taking 500 people away is not easy. I learned that skill set, when you realize it's from the safety and security. I don't know if you were with the squad in 2005 when the bombs went off in London, but actually everything we'd done, everything was the other way around.
Yeah.
Bombs in Tel Aviv, what was going to happen if there was a terrorist attack? We had no plan for hundreds of kids wondering whether their parents had been hurt in an accident, and very quickly were able to get permission for hotels all around Jerusalem to let these children come in and use their phones free of charge to phone London to see if their parents were okay. All these things suddenly became, and we had a gala dinner that night. Should we go ahead with it? Is it a terrorist
Right.
target? Is it? So I learned on the job, which is probably the only way I ever learned anything. I am proud of what we did. I am humble. Most people that come into contact with me will tell you that, but there is a time to stand back and actually be proud of something. And finishing after 20 years at Maccabi GB was that. Selfridges I left by the back door because it was a cull of management and various other things. And it was a shame because it was a great experience in my life. But this has been lovely, and so yeah, I want to now pass on that experience, but very challenging. And something you said earlier, trying to tell Slovakia why you might spend £3,000 on a logo when they'll spend £300, and the cross-border issues is proved to be a bit like the beginning of Maccabi GP, but I do have a passion for it, if not for the politics, certainly for the work.
Yeah, well, it comes out, and I always know from my experience of working in your teams that you always enabled the managers as far as I could see, and you always enabled me. So I always felt very comfortable coming and bringing challenges to you, which I had a few in my squad, and you were always either able to support or let me make the decision, and would always back it. Um, what I also found interesting about those events when we did go traveling was how you got to so many of the matches, because you did. You
That's all
did.
you do. That's all I did. I got in the car. We used to have a schedule of people on the ground. We realised that being on the ground is important. You want to say hi, Brad, but you don't want to interfere. You're in a warm-up process, or you're at half-time process, or towards the game. And we have maps of who's going where, and we get round, and also whether there is any hotspots. We used to meet late at night, at midnight time, and work out who's going to go where, and difficulties dealing with parents at these things is never easy either. We had many those medical issues, etc. But yeah, driving around. My wife came twice. After that, she gave up. She was just like, I am not sitting in a car going round and round in 100 degrees. Just
Well, I'll be honest with you. It's not a holiday, and if
no.
you're in any management, I know as one of the football managers, it was work. It was either 10 days or 3 weeks for the Israel trip. I was on point. You've got a
I,
squad.
I remember the hotel in Haifa. I remember us talking in the bar area. I
Yeah,
think it
yeah.
was a Saturday. There was no day off. Yeah, all right. You might be sitting having the chat by the pool, but you're chatting about something, with an issue that you've got. It was incredibly hot and taxing, and but how many people have experienced it? How many people have taken international teams away? How many people have managed at that level? So
Martin, I will always say, bar the ticker tape parade on the return, it is the most professional sports like I've ever felt in all of the years I did sport, and the team felt the same. Turning up to an airport in kit,
yeah,
right, with a kit bag, they felt like international. Well, they were. They didn't just feel like they were.
yeah,
Going out and playing with your squad training kit, with your kit. No, it was the most professional level of amateur sport that you could get, and I think some of the competitions were just fantastic. But my recollection is always of you enabling. So for me, that kind of brings round back a full circle what you were saying in your style. You do enable. And I think one of the things that Maccabi seem to do very well, and I really wish them well moving forward, because for me, it's my connection to my faith. I'm not a religious person. I don't even believe in God, right? But my identity is strong, and
Yeah.
Maccabi was always my connection to that world that I didn't necessarily live in. So it's a really close place in my heart. So it's just a delight to have you on and talk about it. One last question. Like, what's been your biggest observation over the last year when you look out at people or you and your wife? Like, what have you observed that you found like interesting about, oh, okay, I've observed that in the way people behave or how I'm acting?
Oh, that's a big question to finish. There's a big question to finish. Maybe that you have different groups. There's those that follow every rule given to them. You know, that's the rule. But even those people have been challenged in this current thing. You know, we've got three kids, and you know, 2 of them are married. And when you got a rule of 6 and there's 7 of you, are you going to break that rule? All right. Yeah. So even law-abiding people like us in the garden at the time, going back to last Jewish New Year, you know, broke that rule. So I think what was quite interesting is that the paradox was driving at 32 miles an hour. even the most law-abiding citizens will drive slightly above the thing. So I suppose it's that this has been challenging for everybody, and we can all talk about what people should and shouldn't do over here. But actually, when we're challenged ourselves, it's very hard to keep to the rules. And
I went, and I had to drive up to Sheffield to you know, to pick up our son and bring him back during lockdown, and I kind of crept up late at night on the motorway in case cameras, you know. So you're right. When it suits us, we'll bend and flex. Maybe that's nice, right? Because it shows that Darwin's right. The survival, not of the fittest, the survival of the most flexible.
100%. You can't live your life just by rules, and maybe in some ways that's been the success for you in your business, and maybe for me in my career is actually pushing boundaries and trying to be as flexible as possible and challenging as possible. So.
Martin Berliner, thank you. One, for your influence on international sport for me, but 2, for coming on, and I wish you and Judy really well. And
thank you.
Enjoy consulting. Amsterdam's not a shabby place to have to go for a head office, by the way.
No, it's certainly not, and I'm looking forward to travelling again sooner or later.
Martin, keep well. See you soon.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.